Oh boy, let this be a lesson, Nintendo. This is why you reveal your hardware officially before you put it into mass manufacturing and somehow supply all of your accessory partners with exact dimensions of your console, because we have quite a few new hardware leaks to look at for Nintendo Switch 2 today. One of them dealing with the actual finalized retail product and the supposed dock that we will indeed be seeing shipped in this box, because now we have corroboration of it coming from a second source, and it looks exactly the same as what we saw before from Next Handheld, who now appears to be legit, considering we've seen the left Joy-Con that matches up with the color profile that they leaked ahead of time, with that accent blue and orange supposedly being on the other Joy-Con. All of this stuff is lined up, and in my opinion, there is now a lot more reason to pay attention to all of those Next Handheld leaks. At this point in time, there's some speculation around the release date. We may touch on that in a separate video, but we actually have not just the dock piece to go through, which is kind of, you've probably seen it covered on other channels, but late last night, you might have been familiar with the fact we mentioned in a prior video that at CES, a certain accessory manufacturer would be showing up to promote some Nintendo Switch 2 products, and that they would be answering any questions to fans around Nintendo Switch 2 and the information that they have. We are talking about Genki. They are not an officially first-party licensed Nintendo Switch accessory manufacturer, but similar to that of D-Brand, where the CEO pretty much just said that they got a 3D scan of the console. There is a lot of reason to pay attention to what they are creating here, because they're not going to burn money and just straight up fabricate things that are not going to work with Nintendo's new console when it ultimately releases. And we have a lot of different images to go through, in addition to retouching on the dock portion and the power level, and really what that means for dock performance, because that's also going to be a big topic of discussion in upcoming videos. But we're going to get on the same page with all of this info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. All right, before we dive into the rest of the video, this is actually me from the future, because we do briefly discuss everything in images here, and now we actually have some straight up promotional footage that dropped after I completely rendered and finished this entire video. The rest of the conversation still entirely relevant, but there was this period of time where we questioned in the video if those back buttons are release buttons or input buttons. Maybe they're still both, but clearly in Genki's video, at least to their understanding, those do indeed seem to be release buttons, as you see them right here, because again, there's been a lot of discourse online about whether or not those would be some kind of release trigger. And then a very big detail is this flashing light that does appear to, I mean, more or less, I don't think they put this together after the leaks hit. They're more or less revealing that that mouse feature that we've been talking about is a lock. At least that's what I'm expecting at this point in time. I mean, you legitimately have the red light, same way that you have like a mouse laser flashing there in their promotional video. So the details that they did indeed get from Nintendo, or nefarious other means, who knows. I do believe that maybe accessory partners were briefed and then it was walked back, or plans changed somewhere, and maybe they're not under NDA in some way, shape, or form. But very interesting promotional video that we had to highlight before we go through the rest of the stuff, which is still really cool, by the way. Also, you might notice the Switch 2 logo at the very end of that last video. We are then going to just really briefly watch this less than 30-second clip with a more kind of up close look at that render that we had, and then this is just a filmed version of what they have. But also, one thing that's not in the images, a very nice comparison from Switch 1 to Switch 2. So if you hold your Switch 1 in your hand right there, and we assume to this, this to be a pretty accurate representation of the exact dimensions of Switch 2, because of the fact that they probably have a 3D scan or something like that. That is a beefy boy upgrade, very similar to what we've seen with all the mock-ups, but this is a mainstream accessory manufacturer that's going out and producing products for it. There is even pre-order pages up now. So some breaking news kind of, came out after the fact. We also see them attaching and detaching the Joy-Con here in the nice video. So lots better than what we were talking about. Obviously, none of this stuff is finalized retail products. Nintendo's not going to allow that. They're all clearly mock-ups and things, but still some really cool tidbits of information there that you get to see in action for the Switch 2. Before we dive through the rest of what we're going to be talking about, which is a lot of these accessories, and also another look at that dock that just seems to, Next Handheld, the Reddit user, just seems to have gotten his hands on a Switch 2 retail unit early and leaked it. Crazy. Okay, continue on with the regular video. And we have to first start off with exactly what you see on screen here on the show floor. Genki is indeed showing off mock-up Joy-Cons, and I'm saying mock-up, these are not finalized retail units by any stretch of the imagination. I think upon close inspection, you can kind of see that they're probably maybe not even pressable buttons here, but interestingly, and what you really want to pay attention to with this particular leak, is that the color profile actually matches what we've been talking about from Next Handheld and people who have supposedly held the finalized retail Nintendo Switch in hand. Of course, we have that mysterious C button still intact here. We have them what appears to be on a charging stand, and then we have this orange accent around the Joy-Con that we did also see Next Handheld say was there, because it wasn't entirely clear in that leaked Joy-Con picture that we saw from the accessory or from the actual factory, so presumably that Nintendo's having Foxconn make these things, or whatever assembler decided to snap that photo, or employee of the assembler, I should say. Anyway, this lines up, same shade of blue, same shade of orange. So presumably you would imagine that Genki has seen this type of finalized product in some retail fashion, and they are mocking up or giving their own version of the Joy-Cons in relation to what those look like. Now they also had, now this kind of also, and it could just be the fact that because it's a 3D printed model, don't think that this is finalized stuff. Genki does not have the finalized stuff, but they probably have an accurate 3D scan to create all of the accessory all of the accessory products for ahead of time, which is what we believe that D-Brand had. In fact, the CEO said that. But it's interesting that there are some all white mock-ups as well, because Next Handheld was also talking about there being at some point an all white console with white and black Joy-Cons, but the entire tablet being white this time around. And that's what you see here. Now, maybe that lines into a finalized retail color for Nintendo, maybe it doesn't, but this is very similar to those different ones we've talked about in previous videos where accessory manufacturers were sending out mock-up units for people to take a look at. And that appears to be what we're also looking at here. Again, probably not pressable buttons, probably not exactly like what the bezel and the screen size maybe 1-to-1 looks like. I mean, it's possible that that's exactly what the bezel will look like, but it's also possible that it's slightly different from that perspective, but you do have just the rough shell and outline of what to expect from the hardware. And again, now we have it from so many different sources, unless if all of these accessory manufacturers are just way off on the information they've been given, and I don't believe that that's the case. This is, we've gotten a look at the console before Nintendo got to reveal it and control the messaging, unfortunately. So we have to look at this. So wireless Joy-Con for N Switch 2. So we have on screen here, pretty much some generic third party, like what you expect. Nixie's a brand I've worked with in the past. They make like a really cool alternate Joy-Con that you can slide onto the side that has like a bigger profile. So, for bigger hands, it's way easier to grip. But you do have, of course, them just advertising it in a book here. You can pop it onto like a middle connector where you hold it like a Pro controller, or you can put it on the sides of the console, which you can see there in yet another render to the right of it. But home button, this gear wheel button, which I'm just going to assume, since we haven't seen this on any kind of Joy-Con or anything like that, I'm thinking that this could all be third-party input. It does not have to be anything that's tied into Nintendo's official inputs. And it's also possible that if Genki doesn't have the entire briefing on what this console supports yet, that this is a placeholder button and not something in their finalized product. So you have to keep that in mind as well. There's also a T button here, which, your guess is as good as mine as far as what those might be for, but I do think that this could be for like mapping the buttons differently. Some third-party manufacturers have additional buttons that you can assign different things within the settings of the controller, and maybe those are quick toggle buttons for that. We do have a look at like this see-through rainbow LED Pro looking controller. Now, this is of course the joystick layout, very similar to that of the Pro controller, but also some additional buttons that you can look at. You have the home button, the plus button, the minus button, and then you have again a T button and a more circular button there. So what those are used for in terms of the finalized product, who knows? It's all up for debate and speculation right now. Maybe I am filming this, the night that this stuff is going live. It's possible that a Q&A that Genki actually asks, lets people ask questions about what these buttons do. We might have that information at the time you're watching this video. If that is indeed the case, we will definitely come back and make a follow-up, so make sure you're subscribed for all of that stuff. Then we have a pretty cool looking wireless Pro controller for Nintendo Switch 2 from Genki. LEDs all around the sides of the controller, and even literally every button and D-pad cutout, and even the joystick cutout. Like, it's a pretty cool design. I actually like it. Really looks sleek. Home button just has an H, you have a T, another circle button, and then a plus and minus. So again, let me know in the comments down below if you have ideas for what the T and the O buttons would be for. But we do, have those intact on this particular Pro controller. And then you also have, other than the C button, we don't know of any new buttons that will actually be featured on the Joy-Con, but there is some debate about those back release buttons and whether or not those are release buttons or are for input. And you might remember that Ninspider, a very accurate person over on Fami boards that has provided various pieces of information, such as the magnetically attaching Joy-Cons before anybody else was really saying that. They were saying that there were 2 additional buttons on the back of the Switch Pro controller, or Switch 2 Pro controller rather, from Nintendo, like their version of it. Meaning, does that mean these paddles are what those buttons are? And Nintendo has some additional function buttons built in? Maybe, maybe not. That is still kind of a coin toss in my opinion. We are seeing, you see paddle buttons on the back of third-party Pro controllers very regularly. So it's not that surprising for me to see these here in this particular Genki product lineup or anything like that. I think that that's kind of to be expected with a lot of third-party Pro controllers. It does look like a very cool feature here. They have some adjustable how far the back triggers are going to actually travel, similar to if you've ever used like an Xbox Series X Pro controller or whatever they call like their top of the line premium one. It does have those same kind of settings that you can adjust how far down you want the trigger press to be. That appears to be intact there, and maybe that is the same kind of switch for even these paddles on the inside, but who knows if those are input buttons. I was more on the train that those were not input buttons and they were likely release buttons. But now that we're seeing that optical mouse thing take place with the Joy-Con, and it's believed that might be a mouse, and you hold it in a specific orientation like Next Handheld said for new functionality, well, maybe at that point that button becomes more usable, and I could see that potentially being something very Nintendo-like to do a new gimmick and get out ahead of. But wireless Joy-Con for Nintendo Switch 2, they have their own version of a Nintendo Switch Joy-Con here, again with the middle rail connecting it as more of a Pro controller setup, or just something where this is loosely what it will look like attached to the Switch 2, and it's just a different ergonomics and different kind of shape to how you would hold the controller overall. They have some additional buttons on here too, and that's why I'm thinking these are programmable buttons that you can use for various different functions, and not so much something that we will see in Nintendo's finalized product, because we already know the left Joy-Con would not have an additional button as it does in this particular Pro controller, because we've had too many accessory manufacturers all create their cases and covers without any second button on that side, but every single one of them has the extra C button on the right side. So again, a different look at one of their products, and this is why the companies do it, to be honest. It's a lot of free publicity for them. Nintendo can't be happy about this stuff, and however all these accessory manufacturers got the exact details ahead of time will probably be plugged up before future console launches. But notably in this picture, you do have a very clear C button that is right there at the bottom, besides the home, the T, and the circle button that they have there that we've seen in other controllers. So again, just various different looks at their accessories that even has charging stands and everything lined up. Like, we're getting all the third-party stuff before we even know what to expect from Nintendo from their first-party accessory perspective, which is almost hilarious. I mean, it is just time to announce it at this point in time, in my opinion. But before we look at that up-close picture of the dock, this is kind of the part two. Obviously accessory manufacturers are going to keep doing their thing, but this actually ties into kind of the power level of the Switch 2, particularly when in docked mode, which is really what I care about the most. I'm going to play this a lot more in handheld mode because it's an 8-inch display this time around, and I think that's going to be a nice upgrade. But you still want to see that extra fidelity boost in dock mode, and you can see this tweet from Laura Kate Dale, which says, "This is a new photo I've received from a trusted source showing a Switch 2 dock featuring visible input and output voltage information, other information obscured. In addition, I've learned that the Switch 2 ships with a 60-watt charger for the use with the dock." So notably, that's a bigger 60-watt charger as opposed to the 39 that is in the current Switch, but the actual amount that this dock is rated for in what it's using would be 42 watts, whereas the current Switch is 18. So a lot more power going to this dock, and you can kind of see from the overall design of it, and we will look at that a little bit closer here. I mean, the ventilation, and really this person also confirming that there is going to be a fan included in this dock as well. It matches up with what Next Handheld posted with their AI changed background, but it literally looks like the same components other than that, with this additional, you know, voltage and wattage confirmation. Now, like, it seems like the dock is going to be kind of one of the bigger features than maybe we anticipated, because with the amount of additional heat that you can move around with that additional dock fan, and if Nintendo, you know, is providing all of this additional wattage to the actual console when it's in dock mode, you can get those clock speeds up quite a bit higher, and there may be a reason to believe that there's something of a bigger gap this time around from a handheld performance perspective compared to a seated dock perspective. And I do believe that the dock's going to play in a pretty cool role to what we're going to see in terms of Switch 2 performance when it's all said and done. Unfortunately, this also more or less confirms that the OLED docks that we were hoping, you know, because they have technically the ability for 4K to run through their HDMI ports that are in there, and there's a dock update feature in the current Switch. It does appear that with this voltage confirmation that or wattage rather, we're not going to be looking at using our current OLED docks with the Switch 2. You're going to have a Switch 2 dock almost certainly in order to actually be able to take advantage of any of the new features of the console, or even just see it on the TV, period. But very lastly, wanted to quickly, like, honorably mention, there is a yet another accessory manufacturer just straight up selling this on Amazon of Japan right now. Literally a case that you can go through and purchase for your Nintendo Switch 2 that has not even been revealed yet from Nintendo. So probably the most leaked console in history. In fact, this last image, just kind of a collaboration, or what do you call it? A collage rather, of everything that we've seen leaked for this console so far, as far as like factory leaks and stuff like that. And all of this getting out there ahead of Nintendo revealing it is quite honestly wild in my opinion. Just a quick recap: motherboard, some up close images of the motherboard way back when we had the 2023 October prototype. That's when it was from. Of course, we didn't see that till much later. It was actually in late 2024 when we saw this leak. But that was the prototype leak that now, you know, does line up with everything we've seen since then. A more full picture of the dock and the exact back of the dock. Keep in mind, it is missing the cover to the dock. And I should have mentioned that last dock image we were looking at. It does kind of look like you can see some of the ports. And this also lines up with what Next Handheld said, which is that we should have the same ports within this dock as we did within the current OLED and base model docks, although not the base model dock, because this actually does have an Ethernet port in addition to the USB-A and also the USB-C for power and the HDMI. So same port lineup as what we have in our OLED switches for this next dock. But crazy times to look at this and see like a picture of the sideways tablet. So you see this separate picture that we got of the right Joy-Con from Next Handheld, and then the separate factory leak from the left Joy-Con, the color schemes matching up, everything being kind of a uniform thing here. This is what we're looking at for Switch 2. So crazy times to be alive as a Nintendo fan. Let me know when you think we're finally going to see Nintendo reveal this thing. There's some chatter going around. I'm not expecting this week personally. I think we're looking at Xenoblade news and probably nothing else. I think next week is Donkey Kong. And so I think it's like the last 2 weeks past that in January. But we will have to wait and see, because there's still some possibility that it's sooner than that. And we'll keep you updated on all of that stuff. And there's some reason, you know, that some accounts are now saying January is pretty much a lock, that we may briefly touch on a previous video, or in a future video rather. But let me know in the comments down below what you make of all this. More or less hyped for the console now that we have a very clear look at what it looks like. Are you excited for any of these features, the extra dock wattage, the presumably extra power increase we can see when it is docked? I'm definitely pumped for that. But let me know how you feel of all this, and make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.